Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. I'm your host, Josh Treese. I'm a practicing therapist in Music City, USA, and every week, a guest therapist, counselor, or social worker joins me in the theater to talk about a movie that we've seen and what relationships or mental health issues it highlights. Thanks so much for downloading today's show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and while you're doing that, you can help other people find it by giving the show a 5-star rating and writing a review for it in the podcast app. Oh yeah, and make sure you tell your friends. You can also stay connected with what's happening in the theater by following us on social media. Links to our accounts are in the show notes. This week's guest is Eric Capehart, aka Eric the Counselor. Eric is a counselor for social justice and the host of the podcast Experience Mental Health. His passion is helping those who are marginalized, undervalued, and underappreciated experience better mental health. Let's get this show started, shall we? Dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Eric, how in the world are you? Welcome to the theater. I am so excited to have you here today.
Oh yeah, man. I'm excited. I'm feeling good. It's the fall is among us. You can feel it when you go out. Well, not at this moment, but you can feel that fall is among us earlier in the mornings when I'm usually up and out. You can feel it. You can smell it in the air. You could just feel it. Fall is in the air, and I'm loving it. I'm ready.
I was going to say it's 88, right?
About the summer. Yeah, it's about 80 something. My watch would tell me. I don't know, somewhere around there. It's 80 something right now, but it feels good. It feels good.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel good. I feel good, Josh, and this is good.
I got to tell you, like in the mornings, so I'm an early riser. I get up at 5:30 every day.
Yeah.
And I'm taking the dog out not too long after that. And so this is the time of year where during those early morning walks, you know, we're starting to hit like the low 70s.
Yep.
Kind of
That's
temps.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love it.
Oh yeah. And I'm glad to hear you're doing good too, because I mean, what are we on day, I don't know, 1500 of quarantine?
I don't know what day.
Stay at home right now. And
it's been a while.
We were talking a little bit before we recorded.
6 months.
You know, it is. Yeah. I mean,
it's been 6 months.
Because March is when it started.
Yeah.
But we were talking earlier about just doing our best. Like when it comes to clients, when it comes to podcasting, everybody's doing their best. And I know that for me, you know, dealing with, social distancing and stuff, I feel like everything comes in waves. And so there's days, I can't say there's days I'm all right with it, but there's days when I accept it.
Yeah.
And then there's days where I feel like I rage against it.
You know what? I've just come to accept it for what it is now, honestly. At first, it was bad. My anxiety was through the roof. Stressors was like way high, to the point where I went to see my doctor a couple times. I had him check my heart out, did an EKG. Wow. I'm like, doc, and I know what's wrong as a therapist. I know what's going on. But, you know, being a therapist, you know, you can't really counsel yourself. You still need to, you know, go to professional help. And so I did that. He tried to prescribe me some medication. Actually, he did. Was prescribed some medication. I didn't take it long. I think he gave me I think it was Prozac, actually, like a low dose Prozac. And I started taking it and I wasn't feeling well. So I just stopped taking it. And I took I started taking like magnesium supplements. I started holy basil. I found some really good CBD products. And so I've just been doing it holistically.
Yeah.
I ride my bike every morning. I'm out. I try to get out around 6 and start a ride for at least an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so I've been able to manage my stress that way. The Prozac thing, it just wasn't. I didn't want to do it at first, anyways. And then as I was doing it, I wasn't feeling good about it. So I did some other thing. I've been feeling great.
That's good. Yeah. And it sounds like you were able to kind of use reflection and intention to say like, hey, what do I need right now? How am I feeling? What do I need?
I was struggling. I'll be honest. I was struggling. You know, I have a therapist and I was just struggling, you know, I'm able to be vulnerable. Even just telling you and your audience and everyone that hears this that was prescribed Prozac as a therapist. That's just being vulnerable to show people that none of us are exempt from the stressors in life. And it's all about paying attention to your body and doing something about, how you feel so that you can feel better. And so let me be the poster child for it. Do something to help yourself feel better.
And
No matter who you are.
I've told clients before, like, if you do go the medication route, there's not just one medication and there's not just one dosage. So even you noticing this is how this medication's making me feel, and kind of doing what you needed to do to adjust or stop it, but adding in self-care practices. I've had clients before where I've sent them back to their psychiatrist to say, this is what I'm experiencing. Do I need to change brands, or not brands, but like types of medication, or do I need to change dosages because it's a partnership?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just you take this
right
pill and don't ask any questions. And because
that's how most people see it, though, I believe.
Yeah. But psychiatric drugs they're not that simple.
Right.
I mean,
not.
it's our brain is like the HQ for every part of us. And so when you start messing with that, that's for real. You got to partner up and communicate.
Yeah. It wasn't for me. I had never taken any type of psychiatric medication. Didn't want to, but I was struggling, and I thought that was what would be best for me. I told my doctor about it. I'm off of it. Everything is cool. I hadn't had any major issues, but I was willing to do whatever at that point.
Yeah.
But I'm good, because I used to work out every day. Well, not every day, 3 days a week. I would go to do high intense training at my gym, but that's gone. Well, it was gone at the time. And so I don't know. I was just freaking out. My body was just like, I had to do something. Like, I can't just be at home all day, every day. No high intense training, no nothing other than just being at home with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Well,
wow.
2-year-old. And my wife. And so that was
well, that's certainly exercise right there. I mean, chasing around those two little ones.
Different type of exercise, but that's just kind of how I've been dealing.
Let me ask you this, just out of curiosity, since you're a counselor, did you feel like going to your doctor and talking about your anxiety or suspected depression, or however it is that you categorize that, did you feel like that was any more challenging because of what you do?
Honestly, no, not at this point, because I'm always talking to my clients about, you have to do what you need to do. You have to be vulnerable. You have to pay attention to your body. And so I really didn't have any issues with it. My doctor knows I'm a therapist. He's known me before I became a therapist. So we have that level of understanding and knowledge about each other, to where I didn't feel like I had to put up a front. I mean, that's my doctor, and that's the person who I entrust with my physical health. And mental health will impact your physical health as well. And so I'm very open with my doctor. I don't try to hide anything from him. And it's just like therapists. Like, he can't help something that I don't tell him about.
Right.
And so I want to help. And he would always, normalize it, like, Eric, you're fine, man. Everything is good. You're fine. I think you are experiencing some higher levels of anxiety. Building a house at home with my kids. It's a pandemic. There's a lot going on that's normally not going on. And he was there for me. And my therapist I wasn't able to reach my therapist when it first started. For some reason, I just wasn't able to get in touch with her. And I tried to get another therapist, and that just wasn't working out for me. And so I just ended up going just to talk to my doctor, and then eventually talking to a therapist, even talking to my own clinical supervisor. I just did whatever I felt that I needed to do to help me, because I can't help anybody else, Josh, if I'm struggling. You know what I'm saying? I'm ineffective as a therapist if I'm struggling myself.
Yeah.
Even though I do believe that people in our field actually probably do practice while impaired. Because
that's why I was asking, because I know that there are times, and thankfully, because I've done this for a little while now, and I have done enough personal work in therapy as a client, there are times where I still catch that pride or that
Yeah.
shame, maybe those are the two sides of the same coin, kind of coming up saying, oh no, you can handle this on your own. Go get a book,
Nah.
or check this out. And I have to kind of check myself and say, no, listen, you didn't get to this place in your life by handling it on your own.
Right.
You got here because you chose to be vulnerable and go ask for help.
Yeah.
And so why is right now any different?
For me as a black man, I don't have the luxury to um, tell myself I can handle it, because that's a part of the stigma. That's a part of the reason why black men and women don't go to counseling. That's just the
Mm,
thing. It's a part of it. I can handle this. It's we've normalized
mhm,
mental illness, and and for me, knowing better than that, I had to counter that. Like
mhm.
like I said, I just can't afford to act as if I can handle it on my own when I know I couldn't.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
Does
I
that
know,
become like a signal? Like if you have that rise up in you at all, does that become a signal that says, oh, this is extra important to pay attention to and I need to go to someone?
I mean, it really depends on the frequency of it. I mean, there's moments where my anxiety, or I may be in a depressed mood, but it's not like that severe, and it
Mhm.
maybe just a day or a moment, not even a whole day. But if my anxiety is heightened, maybe for doing this podcast could have spiked my anxiety. There's a normal anxiety with it, but I'm not out of control and like I need to go talk to my doctor. I need to go see a therapist. But if it's going on for a few days, and I'm just not, in a funk, and I'm not really operating the way I normally would, yeah, I don't have any problem. I'm going to go talk to someone that can help me.
Yeah.
And I try to be the example for that. Like again, as a black man, I don't have to be, but I've taken the responsibility to say, and it is a responsibility to be the example.
Yeah.
Show people, yes, I'm a black man, and I'm a therapist, a counselor, and I still go to counseling.
Mhm.
And I've seen it happen. It just has a ripple effect. It breaks down walls, and people are like, well, if you can go, I can go. And so,
100%.
yeah,
I
that's the
I
reason.
think that one of the reasons why I love stories so much is because I think that when a person hears a story that is outside of their typical sphere, it opens up possibilities in their mind.
Absolutely.
So, a listener who hears you say, as a black man, I take my mental health very seriously. And whenever I see, X, Y, or Z, I assess and I go and I'm vulnerable and I ask somebody for help. Maybe that option has never occurred to them, but hearing your story lets them know not only is it a possibility, but it is something that could help. And if he can do it, then I can do it.
100%.
And eh, that's the best thing. I love that. It's why we do the show. It's why I got into therapy as
Really?
a client and then later on as a therapist.
Yeah.
It's just so powerful. Well, let me ask you specifically about your story.
Mhm.
Why therapy? Why do you do what you do?
Yeah. So, and of course, I get asked that question a lot, because this is kind of like a second career for me. My first career, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I've done many different businesses straight out of college. I started a lawn care business and went on to do multiple other businesses. In 2007, I founded a nonprofit organization called All the King's Men. And our mission was to reduce the likelihood that a black male would ever come into contact with juvenile court. That was our mission. And we did that. We reached our mission through mentorship programs. After school programs is what we started doing. We had a partnership in Nashville with the Metro Parks, where we could go into any community center that we wanted to and provide our after school mentorship program. So we did that. And for 11 years, I was the CEO, and I was also a mentor, of course, um, going to families' homes, sitting at the table, listening to their parents tell me about what's going on, hearing mothers, mostly mothers, single mothers, because of the demographic. I mean, it's no secret that 50% of children are being raised by a single parent. And then when you think about African Americans, it's in the 70, 75% range of children are being raised by a single parent, mostly a mother. I found myself talking to plenty of mothers. I mean, we had over 11 years, We've had over 600, 700 boys. I haven't talked to every parent in this way, but many times when there's issues going on between their sons and the mother would call us, and I would find myself sitting in their house listening and observing the home, right? And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, I can understand what's going on with him, but as I'm sitting here in this environment, I see so much extra stuff going on, so many other things that I have now come to notice to be maladaptive behaviors and even some mental health issues. And so I would just spend hours, Josh. I mean, just hours just listening, and it never felt tiring to me, you know. Well, I ain't gonna say never. Sometimes it would be like, okay, this has been like 2 hours. I'm ready to
But it's a
go.
different kind of tired. Like
Right. I'm just
because you're
mentally like,
connecting.
yeah,
Yeah, it's different.
yeah. And so after doing that for so long and realizing that mentorship was a very important component to helping these boys stay out of juvenile court, we also realized that there's a big piece that we're not able to help with, and that was the mental health piece. And so I was working at an agency as a contractor doing a mentorship program, and I was working closely with therapists. And one of them was like, you should really look into counseling. And I had already had an interest in it. My mother had an interest in psychology. She's a nurse. But I didn't think that was the path that I wanted to take. But I actually looked into it. And I decided, you know what, this is something that I do want to do so that I can begin to merge the two, the mentoring with mental health services, mostly group. We did group mentoring. And so once I found out about group counseling, I was like, oh, this is exactly what we're already doing. I just need to structure it a little differently. And we can do group counseling. We can offer that for our members in our mentorship program. And so that's really, that's it. That's the impetus. I was working 11 years as a mentor, running a mentorship organization, being like, being really close into people's lives outside of just the mentoring, and getting to be in their families in an intimate way, hearing and learning and talking mothers out of giving up on their sons and just trying to give them things to do, using the skill of listening, right? You have to be a good listener. And that's how I became a therapist. And I went to school. I started out in 2014. It took me 3 years to finish because I was taking one class a semester or maybe two. It finished up in 2017. And so I'm a new therapist, but I've been doing this kind of one-on-one work, mentoring for over 13 years, 14 years now.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's kind of my story. And then here's another piece. Along the way of me being a mentor, I felt like I want to talk to a counselor. But I couldn't find one that was a good fit. I went into it thinking I want to talk to a black man. I just went into it thinking that, because I think I was thinking that, and I still do think that there's a relatability factor that's important to me as I'm going to tell somebody what's going on with my life. I need them to know certain things and have this relatability. We call it cultural competence, but I needed someone, a part of the culture, that realized that everybody is not a monolith, but there's certain things I don't need to explain to you. You know what I'm saying? And so I couldn't find a therapist. I finally found one, a black male, went to him, and it still wasn't a good fit. That was kind of like the part that was like, oh man, I was looking for this person.
Was that like personality, do you think, at that point?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was more so personality, a vibe you get.
Yeah.
I just wasn't getting the vibe. I was just kind of felt like he was like teaching me, like a teacher. I just didn't get a good vibe from it, like I was in the classroom. And so that really made me decide, like, all right, I know there's other black men that want to talk to a black counselor that's relatable, that has a similar story. Like my story is growing up in poverty, single parent, all that goes along with it, in the streets. I've never been arrested. Well, I have been arrested, but I don't have a criminal record. But all of that is like it's a cultural experience that, unfortunately, like 1 in 3 black men have been to jail. So we know what it's like to encounter the police. 1 in 4, one of those two numbers. That's why I don't like giving out stats. But you can leave this in.
It's safe to say more than is the number that is comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not comfortable. And so there's a certain relatability factor that comes into play, that I wanted to offer to men who would not traditionally seek counseling.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so
You
here I am
became
today.
what you needed.
Exactly. That's a concise way to sum it up. Yes, I became what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That,
And so
you know,
that's the
the
story.
way that you described, um, just it reminds me of a past guest, Jeremy Lehman, who did the movie Rocket Man. But he said in his journey that he was with a therapist. He identifies as gay. He was with a therapist who was heterosexual, and he found that a lot of his energy was spent kind of teaching the therapist, quote unquote, the language, so
Right.
then they could do the work.
Yeah.
And he found that when he switched to a therapist who came from a similar background, also identified as gay, they just jumped right in
Yeah.
and they started doing the work. And he didn't have to expend the same amount of energy himself
Right.
in order to catch the therapist up so that
That's
they could then kind of start on common ground.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I went through. I went
Yeah.
to a white woman and I was trying to explain to her a part of why I was in counseling was because of society and what's going on. This was years ago. This is not today,
Mm-hmm.
which is still an issue. And she was asking questions that made me feel like I had to defend myself
Mm-hmm.
in the counseling. And she wasn't intentional with it. It wasn't on,
Yeah.
you know, it's just she didn't know. And she flat out told me, she's like, Eric, I don't know, like you did. Like she just flat out told me, I don't know what it's like. You know, I don't know what it's like. This was maybe a middle-aged white woman at the time. She doesn't know anything about I was maybe in my late 20s.
Uh-huh.
She's like, I don't know what it's like to be a 20-something-year-old black male living in America. And so I had to explain I just had to give a whole lot of extra context that to me was like, man, this is not it. You know,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
not it. But
And
as soon as,
I know that so much of my work with clients, and I work primarily with people that have sex addictions.
yeah,
But with that, you know, there's so much shame, there's so much loneliness, there's so much trauma. And so much of my work is validating and normalizing in there. And if you're sitting with somebody who has no concept
yeah,
of any kind of similar experience that you have,
yeah,
I don't think it makes that work impossible. I just think it puts it so much farther down the road
yeah,
that she would need to ask all these questions. And if you feel like you have to take a defensive stance, it almost seems like, and I can't imagine this was intentional on her part, the session is not about you. The
yeah.
session is about her.
Teaching her, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, how you feel is how you feel. She wasn't trying to put me on defense. I mean,
Right.
why would she? Um, but it just is what it was. You know, I just didn't feel that connection, that relatability
Mm-hmm.
factor, which is what made my mentoring seem, it was just easy. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't have to take a class on how to be culturally sensitive to black kids that grew up in poverty. I was a black kid that grew up that way. I know what it's like. Um, I know. I mean, I was able to relate to every step of these boys' lives because I've been every stage of their life.
You walked those steps.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And so I could pull from those experiences. So when they would say, "Oh, I get in trouble all the time because I mean, I'm not a bad kid. I'm just talking and I just talk a lot or whatever and get suspended." I know what that's like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just that relatability factor that I used in mentoring is the same relatability factor that carries over into my counseling practice.
Hmm.
And so that relatability factor is a word that I just used a lot when I was a mentor.
Yeah.
Because people would say, how you just, these boys, they just flock to you. Like everybody wants to be in All the King's Men. And I'd say, we're not doing anything special. We really weren't. You know, we were just showing up and being consistent in their lives, which I knew that was what they needed. And then we would notice that their grades would improve, their school attendance would improve, like their morale would improve.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't even measuring those things. Those were not the things that we went into saying that these are going to be the measurements or the benchmarks for us. It
Yeah.
just wasn't. We were trying to prevent them from going to juvenile,
Yeah.
right? But as a result, we noticed the grades going up. All of our boys would graduate on time. Like it was just, and we weren't doing anything special, Josh. We really weren't.
Wow.
We were just making sure that we showed up and making sure that we were consistent in doing what we said we would do because The last thing a young black male needs is another black man to be inconsistent and absent from his life.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to be the ones to introduce a new man into these kids' lives, and then that person's now gone. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, man.
Well, if a kid's already got a message inside of them that says, I can't depend on an adult, the last thing you want to do is provide an experience that justifies that message.
Absolutely.
You know,
And it's a relatability thing. You need to know that when you're working with young black kids, that more than likely there's already a man who's walked out on them.
Yeah.
For some reason, or for whatever the reason is. We don't want to be an organization that gives them that same experience, because you know what it does. It makes them feel like, well, what's wrong with me? What did I do? Like, and it's not even about them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I read something in a book towards the end of last week that talked about all of these things that kids can endure. But one of the things that across the board a kid can't endure is a parent leaving, because the kid, and it all has to do with neurological development, up until you reach puberty, you have a lot of trouble thinking abstractly. You have a lot of trouble thinking about another person's perspective. It's a lot of concrete thinking. So a kid always thinks, this was my fault. I did something. And to have that particular message reinforced is just so damaging.
Yeah, it will lead to our boys they just don't care. Like, they just have this I don't care attitude. No man's going to tell me what to do, and that's going to lead them into making bad decisions and lead them to juvenile.
Yeah.
Which was the exact opposite of our mission. We wanted to reduce the likelihood that they would ever go to juvenile. And so we just spent a lot of time focusing on what we knew about being black men. We had black men as mentors, and we even let other kids join. We had white kids in the program. We had Asian kids in our program, one Hispanic kid. It was just a brotherhood, and it was just an understanding that even just as a minority, there's a certain experience that our minority counterparts don't experience.
Yeah.
And there's a psychological toll to that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like in your program, you helped these kids feel like they were seen and feel like they were heard, which is such a humanizing thing. Like when I worked in churches and worked with primarily middle school kids, I remember telling my volunteers, every single kid that walks into this room, I want them to get a high five, and I want you to learn their name. Because as a middle school kid myself, I remember walking through the halls feeling invisible.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you aren't seen, you feel like you don't matter. Yeah. And I said, I don't know what happens outside of these four walls, but when they're in the four walls, I want them to know they matter.
Yeah. High five every day. Every kid was every single day. Every day. That was just a part of what we did. You make sure that every kid is greeted when they come through these doors, or whether we're coming into their school. Every kid, every day.
Wow. So that sounds like therapy was like a natural extension.
Yeah, it does.
It was like an evolution.
Yeah, it really, that's the way I look at it. I just evolved into, which that's life in anyway. When I think about my life and manhood, I think it's just an evolution. You're always evolving to the next phase. And it makes sense for me to be practicing as a mental health counselor today. It just makes sense to me.
Do you feel like, so it sounds like maybe your concept of what counseling was almost developed with your feet on the road, being in young men's houses and listening and empathizing with them, since becoming educated and trained in it and then stepping into it as a career. What have you found that's changed that concept? Like, how has your concept of what counseling is changed?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's no secret, and it's really not that, and this is a cultural stigma, that Black people don't go to counseling. We either pray about it or get a pastor or somebody to talk to you about it, or you just not deal with it at all. You just normalize negative behaviors, and it's just the way that it is, right? That was my perception of it. That's just what it is. It's like you grow up. That's just what you think about it.
This is the world.
Yeah, just flat out. But now that I am a therapist, I'm. It's like a part of my whole purpose is to shatter that myth or the stigma that you are weak if you need counseling, especially if you're a man, because that can't be anything further than the truth. I actually kind of look at it the other way, and I think it's like if you know you need help and you don't try to get it, that to me is actual true weakness.
Yeah.
To me, it is.
Because it's not recognizing your limitations.
Yeah, and it's also it may be like fear. There's something that's stopping you from getting the help that you need, and to me, that is an indication of a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm stuck under a brick or something and I can't get it off of me, I know I need to get it off me because it's killing me, but I don't have the strength to move it. I kind of equate, needing help and not getting it the same way. That to me is like a true weakness. And I even ask men, when they come to me, and I'm getting I'm seeing a big uptick in Black men reaching out for help. And I ask them, do you feel weak right now as you're talking to me? And no one has said yes to this point. None of them have even said, yeah, I feel weak. They may even start off with it. It's like, I've never done this before. I don't know what to expect. Okay, we can do that. I'm cool with that. And then when we're in it, I'll say, all right, you're telling me all this stuff. And I'll say, how do you feel? I feel fine. And I'll say, do you feel weak? And I'm like, no, I don't feel weak at all. I feel empowered. I feel better. Like,
oh, yeah.
They're smiling and, feeling good about therapy. Like,
that's that connection that you establish with them, though. Like when you as a therapist lean into that therapeutic relationship and you can establish a true connection, it fills people up.
Absolutely.
And what they find is, oh man, vulnerability is not as scary as I was telling myself that it has to be when I feel safe.
That's right. I tell my clients, I say a lot of things a lot of times, and I learned that as a mentor. It doesn't lose power just because I've said it 10 times to 10 other people. It's just as powerful to the person who heard it the first time. I tell people vulnerability is an accurate measure of courage. I really believe that vulnerability is an accurate measure of the courage that you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I tell that to people, they're like, all right, I'm going to show you how courageous I am. And it's not even about me. I tell them it's not you trying to show me how courageous you are, but it's to show yourself.
Yeah.
That you have the courage to do and say what you need to say. And they just open up. It's like the floodgates open right up. And people tell me so much. And at the end of the session, they're like, man, I didn't realize I was holding all that in. Or I said all this stuff that they've been carrying for all this time. And all it took was someone to create a safe environment, have some sense of relatability, and just let them know that the vulnerability that's necessary is a measure of your courage, especially for men. I want to show you how courageous I am.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite lines from a TV show and a book, I guess, is from the very first episode of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And Ned Stark is sitting there with his kid, Bran, and Bran's asking him questions about, his fighting and military and all that stuff. And he asked him if he was afraid. And Ned said, yeah. And then Bran said, but I thought you were brave.
Yeah.
And Ned said, it's impossible for a man to be brave unless he's afraid.
Absolutely.
And I thought that's exactly what it is. Bravery is not the absence of fear.
Right.
Bravery is recognizing and putting full value to your fear, and yet making a decision, and not even in spite of the fear, because the fear gives you good information.
Yeah.
But making a decision in the presence of the fear that will help you.
Yeah. I recently heard that same thing. I don't watch. You said Game of Thrones. I'm not.
Yeah,
into
that's a first episode. Yeah.
But I heard that. I recently heard that in another film, or maybe a TV show or something, where he was explaining that. You're a soldier or whatever, but that doesn't mean you don't have fear. I was watching a documentary actually, and there was a soldier saying every soldier has fear. It was like a D-Day documentary, right? When they were storming,
Normandy.
Normandy, right? Yeah. And obviously you're going to be afraid if you're on that ship and that door lets down. you know, and it's just all bullets coming, and you know that you're going to have fear, but you still have to have that bravery to still, in the midst of that fear, still understand you have a mission, and you have to, until your dying breath, you have to keep pushing and get through the fear. So I think that's kind of similar to what.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know if you're a person who doesn't have fear, I would say you're probably a person who doesn't have love.
Yeah,
Because the reason why we have fear is because we care about things,
yeah, that's good.
because we care about people.
Yeah,
And what fear is, it's being afraid that something that you care about will change or
yeah,
end or be lost. Because I think the root of every fear, no matter what it is some element of the unknown. And if you
right.
think about like that very first fear that every human gets, fear of the dark,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
because we can't
Don't
see. We
know.
don't know what's there. We're scared. We need
Yeah,
that night light. We need our parents
yeah,
to come in and turn that lamp on or something like that.
yeah,
And so it makes sense then that the human natural response to fear, that's kind of like a reactionary trigger response, is to try to take control.
right.
Because if every fear is rooted in something that's unknown, the natural response to that is to try to make it known, to try to have some kind
Yeah,
of agency or control over it, to where you have the ability to influence the situation.
right.
But then that like multiplies into so many other things, that control,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
Wow, holy cow. Well, what do you think about talking about a movie? Let's talk about a movie.
All right, let's do that.
What movie did you pick for us to talk about today?
I picked the Five Bloods.
The Five
The Five
Bloods.
Bloods. Yeah, man. I thought it
uh
was written.
Netflix, Spike Lee,
Yeah,
just this
Spike
year, right?
came out this year,
Yeah.
earlier in the summer, maybe like June, May, sometime.
Uh-huh.
Highly anticipated. I knew he was working on the film, and when it came out, I just had to. I knew. I mean, I was just waiting on this film. I like Spike Lee. I used to want to produce movies as well. I wanted to make movies actually,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm just a movie guy. I've watched I don't know how many films. I really I have no idea. It's up there. Like the number's pretty high.
Oh
It's a
yeah.
high number. And so yeah, the Five Bloods. I actually was like, I want to talk about a good movie that's going to spark conversation that might be difficult to have.
Okay.
It might be even be difficult for people to listen to. Not because I want to scare anybody or nothing like that. It's just these are the conversations that I think need to be had.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
what
and
was it
so
about this movie that made
what
you
about this movie? So this film, there's many things. And as I was thinking about this interview, I was like, how am I going to really tell or say everything I want to say? So I'm just going to let it go and just be free with it. Like one of the reasons I picked this is not the original film I had in mind actually. Um, but I chose the Five Bloods because there's a mental health piece to it.
yeah,
One of the main characters, I have these guys' names down.
Paul?
Paul actually is his name. Paul, yeah, he in the film he's struggling bad with demons and PTSD, and just the fact that it's a war film, which war in itself has psychological implications. Then there's black soldiers, and so being black, being a soldier, and going to war, all and the mental health piece, you know, all of that together made me feel like this would be a great film. In this social climate that we're in today, one of the characters had the "Make America Great" hat on again, so there's
That was
some
Paul, yeah.
political. Yeah. That was Paul, the white guy at the end. I can't remember his name. I think he was like one of the smugglers that was
He
going to
was
smuggle the
the
gold
bad
back into the
guy,
United
I
States. What
guess.
was the yeah? He ended up getting shot at the end.
Des
Yeah,
Roach.
yeah. Is that him?
Yeah.
Is that his real name or was that his name in the
Nah, that was
film?
the character's name.
Yeah,
The actor's name is Jean Reno. He was in that movie The
yeah,
Professional a long time ago.
yep. So him, and you know, there's the Black Lives Matter piece at the end as well. So I think it was a relevant film to discuss. It's great for the platform that you have,
Yeah.
Therapist Theater. And so I was like, hey, let's talk about this film. And
Yeah.
I told you, we talked about this before. I had to give you like a little pre-warning
Yeah.
that it's heavy. It's pretty intense, you know,
It
from the
is.
start. And so, you know, I
Which
thought it
I
would be
gotta
a good
tell
film
you,
to.
like I have a bad habit. It's not a bad habit, but like there's times when, because of our schedule, I'll watch the movie the day that I'm recording.
Yeah.
And because I'm an early riser, sometimes I start the movies quite early. So thank you for that warning, because if I'd have hit play on that at 5:30 this morning
Yeah.
without knowing anything about it,
It was pretty
seeing
intense.
that at first thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't help,
And it's
as
a
you were
long
kind of,
film too.
yeah, it's like almost 2.5 or maybe over 2.5.
Yeah. I think it was over 2,
Yeah.
which films nowadays are about 2 hours anyways.
Yeah. I also think so much of what you were describing about the movie is kind of centered in the character of Paul.
Yeah.
Of course, the other 3 or 4 of the Bloods, like they had similar experiences, but Paul kind of
Yeah.
contains a lot of things inside of him. And something that
Yeah.
I thought about after hearing your why therapy was you also had this element of father and son with Paul too.
Right. With the son. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what made, and another reason I wanted to do this film, or I should say I'm glad we're doing it, is because of Chadwick Boseman, who was
Yeah.
Norman Norman, and it just really, and I've seen all of his films that he has produced since being diagnosed with cancer, not knowing.
Yeah.
And I just think he was just an awesome guy, just a great actor. And the fact that he gave us so many like great films right before he passed
Such a
away, and
short
this
amount of
being one of
time.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know it. Like great films. I've seen what's the film? Marshall. I've seen this one we're discussing, of course, Black Panther, 42.
Yeah.
I'm not into the whole Avengers, so I haven't seen those films yet. But I'm just not, man. I don't know.
I'll tell you what, though.
But yeah,
I'll tell you what. There's a moment in the last one, in Endgame.
yeah,
There's a moment right before the big fight starts. Captain America's standing on the battlefield all by himself. And he is kind of like resolute and determined, like, I'm going into this, I don't want to die.
yeah.
And all of a sudden he hears on your left, and that's Anthony Mackie flying in. And then this portal opens up, and in comes T'Challa,
Yeah,
and Shuri, and then oh gosh, who is Danny? Oh gosh, his main general's name. I'm blanking. Okoye. Okoye is on the other side of him. The 3 of them walk in. I've never in my life heard a theater erupt louder than when the 3 of them walked in.
Yeah.
On that battlefield.
I'm getting excited listening to it.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible.
They knew it was going to be okay. Yeah.
You know what, though? I'm glad you brought up Chadwick. So my wife and I are both from South Carolina. My wife actually went to the same high school as him. They weren't there at the same time, but small town high school. And I think because of who you are and your passion for helping Black men experience mental health, engage with it, I was wondering if you could talk maybe just a little bit. There is no question on anybody that has a set of eyes and a set of ears, the outpouring of love and grief that has happened since Chadwick died. Why do you think that is? Because I don't know how many actors, and out of all those actors, I don't know how many Black male actors, but there was something about him. What do you think that was?
Well, I'll speak about his universal appeal. Then I'll get to specifically for Black men and just Black people. Chadwick he had that, I don't know, I never met him, but as I was listening to the tributes, he just had to be just a genuine, awesome guy. You know what I'm saying? And I think any person can relate to that. If you're a good soul, you have a good vibe about yourself, you're passionate about your craft, you make others around you better, you always come to work with a good attitude, like that's just going to resonate with people. As it relates to Black America, and I don't even really I actually have a difficult time referring to people as Black and white. I'm just not into that whole color thing. But for the sake of the conversation, we lost a hero, and we really feel like we're always losing our heroes. The people that we can look up to, even though Chadwick played a character as the Black Panther, that was other than Luke Cage, I mean, that's it for kids, generations of kids to say, oh yeah, Black Panther, right? Now he's gone. And to me, it's like the cycle of anytime we have a hero or a leader or someone, and I don't want to say anytime because that's an absolute, but generally speaking, our heroes are taken away from us, whether it's political heroes. I mean, they're just dying left and right, or they're killed, some one way or the other. And I think that's what really happened. Like I felt this. I mean, even when I saw it, it was like 9:00 at night. I'm on Instagram and I see "Rest in Peace" Chadwick Boseman. It struck me. Like I'm usually not struck by that. I mean, I am, but I actually felt the deep sense of, dang, man, like, dang,
It didn't
like
feel
real
real.
hurt. It never feels real at first. And so, especially if you see it online, you got to go verify it first, before you can really feel it. And once it was verified, I was like, wow, this guy's gone, And I had just watched Marshall, and I've seen all the films. It just seems like another loss, man.
Yeah.
Another loss to our community. Someone that we could look up to in the films and even in just real life. And it's just a profound sense of loss again.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you kind of hone in on Chadwick as a person. To say that he had an air of authenticity about him. He and I never met him either. He struck me as a person who knew who he was, and out of that self-knowledge was able to step into roles without maybe like losing himself. And so that's just the man. But you look at the roles that he played. This guy was a champion of Black men. I mean, Jackie Robinson, Thurgood Marshall, James Brown, T'Challa. How does one guy get to hit all of those? I mean, to be entrusted.
Feel like it's the same person. There's some films where you see an actor, you feel like it's the same, like Kevin Hart. I feel like no matter what role he plays, it's the same in every film.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say Will Smith, but Kevin Hart too. Yeah,
he played all of those roles, and you believed it. You felt like you were actually watching Thurgood Marshall. It was just so real, kind of like a Denzel type of character, type of actor. But
well, I mean, there's a reason for that because of Denzel's influence and because of him paying for him to go to Oxford. I mean,
exactly. Exactly. And to lose him, I'm almost 42 years old. It struck me in a way. It makes you look at your own life as well. Like, man, that's a young age.
Yeah.
But the impact, and to see all those people of all ethnicities saying great things about him like that, it just reminds you that not reminds you, but it makes you think he had to be a great person.
Yeah.
He just had to be a great guy, like a stand-up great person.
Have you seen that clip of
actor as well?
Have you seen that clip of him talking about when they were filming Black Panther, him being in communication with those two children that had cancer?
No, I haven't. I saw some pictures of him visiting some hospitals, but I haven't seen him talking about that. No.
It's this clip. It's probably on YouTube. I saw it on Twitter. It's him and Lupita Nyong'o and the actress that played Okoye. And they're sitting in front of this like blue backdrop. And he's talking about, as he was doing the movie, he was in communication with these two young children who had a terminal diagnosis. And as he's talking about it, he says, he said, I remember what it was like to be a kid on Christmas Eve and to be in anticipation of the next day and of the gift that I received and all that. And they were talking about this movie in the same way. He said, every time I would talk with him, it made me want to go to the gym even more. It made me want to work on this accent even more. It made me want to work on this story. And then he kind of stumbles and he says, when I heard that they, implying when they passed on, and then he gets choked up and starts crying. All the while, no one around him knowing that at that same time he had a diagnosis.
Yeah. I think you said it earlier. He knew himself and he accepted the responsibility that he had placed upon him to be himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say it that way. Yeah. he accepted who he was and accepted the responsibility that comes along with being that person, to make sure that I'm a good person, and I'm going to live in this authenticity. This is who I am. Even though he was dying and he knew it, you know. Well, I don't know if he knew he was dying, but he knew, you know.
Well, it kind of reminds me of in your why therapy, when you talked about sitting with all of these folks. I talk to clients, and when I'm talking to them about learning how to be in the here and now, which is basically mindfulness, but how to stop time traveling. In other words, ruminating on what happened in the past and worrying about what's going to happen in the future. So at any point, you're never in the present. How do you get in the present? I always try to ask them to reverse engineer it and say, who in your life, when you're around them, do you walk away from and you always feel better? You always feel filled up. Because I think that if a person can truly be in the present and they can be with you and they can see you, that is being in the here and now. So if you can identify, well, that person, if I have a 5-minute conversation with them, I'm walking on clouds.
Yeah.
That is your example then. That's how to do it. So you reverse engineer it. If you can't figure out how do I get there, you find somebody that's already there. And you just do what they do.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why I was a mentor. Like, I accepted that responsibility to be the example for a lot of things.
But the example as yourself, which is, I think, the most noble thing. It's not, I'm going to be something I'm not, but it's, I'm going to be me.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to be me in my successes and my failures, in my virtues and my deficits. And I was talking to a client the other day who his divorce was, this session was like right after lunch, but his divorce had been finalized that morning.
Wow. Yeah.
He had walked out of the courtroom, come to session.
Wow.
And he was saying, you know, I gotta get as much processing as I can get done because I've got my son tonight. Kind of implying once 5 o'clock hit, he couldn't have his feelings on anymore.
Right.
And I said, I get that. I said, but what if, you know, instead of worrying about what you had scheduled tonight, what if you just, and his son was 4, what if you just grab your boy and you say, hey, honey, tonight, let's sit on the couch and watch a movie that's fun because daddy's feeling really sad.
Yeah.
And I just need to be with people I love tonight. What if you showed your son that it's okay for a man to have a full experience of sadness and live through it?
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to kill you.
Him, no, you're speaking what I believe. You have to be the example. You have to show, you're in that situation, show your son, yes, I have feelings. This is how I'm feeling. I'm still your dad. I'm still your hero and all of that. And I'm going to be the same dad after we have this conversation. But this is how I feel right now.
Yeah.
It's okay. I think it's like he accepted the responsibility of a dad. Like, I'm his dad.
Yeah.
You know, I could fake it and act like everything is okay, or I could be real with my son.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what I practice in my house. Same situation. My wife the other day was upset about what was going on. I said, my daughter came in and said, "What's wrong, mommy?" She said, "Oh, nothing. I'm good." I'm like, just tell her you're upset because a man was just killed by a police officer, shot 7 times in the back. That's why you're upset, you know? And we had that conversation. You know, my daughter's 5, so we had to have it in a 5-year-old way, but she was able to understand. She's like, "Oh, mommy, that's mean. You know, why would he do that?" And so she's began to understand why she felt what she was feeling.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's important to do.
Yeah. So let's Chadwick is in the movie. He plays the role of one of the 5 Bloods, which was a squadron in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. The 4 other guys in the squad come back to Vietnam in the present day because at the end of the war, his body was inside of a plane that a landslide, well, somehow it got covered up. Oh, right. Napalm. The army bombed it. But then a landslide in the present day kind of uncovers it. So they go to not only find his remains, but also they had recovered a treasure, I guess that's what you call it, a bunch of gold. Yeah. And they had buried that, and they went to get that and to get him.
Right.
And, you know, so we got Delroy Lindo, that's Paul, Paul, Otis, and Eddie, and Melvin. which Isaiah Whitlock Jr.
Yeah.
from The Wire, he had that line in there where he just went, "She."
That's his favorite. That's like that's his thing, right? Since The Wire, it's like every time I see him in a film or anywhere, I know that line's coming.
Oh man. There's a video that somebody made on YouTube where they extended it. It's like 2 minutes long and it just keeps hanging there. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Um
that'd be fun to do that. Yeah.
But you see these four guys show up in Vietnam who have relationships with each other. I'm assuming they hadn't seen each other in a while, but they fell right back in.
Yeah.
And then you kind of just see them as they have their mission going back and forth throughout the movie. What about the movie stuck out to you the most? I mean, you've talked about the Black soldier experience. To speak to the warning that you gave me over email, the movie opens with actual footage from the Vietnam War, including the Viet Cong shooting a guy in the head.
Right there.
Like real footage of it.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a Black soldier that got shot, but
that's what I wanted to give you a warning about. That was the scene. I was like, all right, now this starts off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though that wasn't like a Black soldier experience, that one clip.
Yeah.
I mean, they speak to that throughout the movie by saying we were put in the front because we were devalued.
Absolutely. There's a scene in the film where they had announced, how the lady on the radio, the Vietnam radio, was broadcasting to the Black soldiers specifically, trying to, get, them to leave or give up the fight. And she told them that Dr. King had been murdered or killed, murdered, basically. And the Bloods were all up in arms and they were ready to kind of retaliate. They were like, we just need to start shooting motherfuckers. And Stormin' Norman, which was the leader, the squadron leader, Chadwick, he was like, no, we're not. We're not going to do that. We're going to rise above and we're going to fight the fight that we're in. And then they were like, man, the hell with that. We're going to go off. And he was like, you're going to have to kill me first. And so that scene was just so deep for me, is because Black men, it doesn't matter. We're always in the fight. We're always in a fight. And we just have to choose which fight to fight. Like those men were fighting for the freedoms that Americans enjoy, while at the same time, when they come home, they're not enjoying those freedoms. And the people that are at home are not enjoying the freedoms that they're fighting for. And even in the midst of the fight, the war, a leader is killed. Like I said, our leaders are not always, but generally killed. A leader was killed. And they're overseas fighting a war, and they're like, why are we even fighting this war at all? Those people hadn't done anything to us. We're killing these people. They're killing us. We go. It's like it's just like the perfect conundrum, like of being a Black male. Like, where do we fit in this whole thing? Yeah. When can we not be in a fight or in a war for our own lives? And so that was a very powerful scene.
I think Paul said, Black men fought in the Civil War and they promised us freedom and we didn't get it. Black men fought in World War II and they promised us freedom and we didn't get it. We're fighting in this war and we're promised freedom and we still aren't getting it.
Yeah, that's the perpetual. We're always in a fight for our lives, and we're not all in a war zone per se, but really it almost feels like even today that it's a war zone.
Yeah,
it seems like. And I'm a Black male, right? And I see these. I try not to watch it all the time. I haven't even seen Jacob. What was his name? Jacob Blake. Yeah, I haven't seen his video. I didn't watch the George Floyd for a while because I don't want to keep watching that. You know what I'm saying? Because it almost feels like that's me right there on the street. It really feels that way. Or my son. I have a 2-year-old son. My mom worries about, I bike, right? I ride my bike in the mornings. My mom is always worried about me riding my bike. My wife's worried, like, be careful, make sure. It's like, I don't want to, that's just not cool, man. And so I really limit those videos, but that's what I'm talking about when I say it's like a perpetual war zone. It's like Black men, and I don't speak for all Black men. I'll just speak for me. I'm not afraid. I'm not scared at all But I am aware that there are some elements in our society that just don't like me just for my existence. And unfortunately, some of those people are responsible for protecting us, and they can pull me over at any given time, which has happened. I've had guns pointed at me. I've been handcuffed for no reason. I've had a gun pointed at me by police for no reason, stopped for no reason, no ticket, no nothing, just running my information, and then they tell you to leave. It's like, that's what I'm talking about. And I think that's why that scene was so, um, impactful for me, because it was just like a perfect scenario of what it's like to be a black man. We are
Yeah.
always on the front lines. Um, and this it's just like we're on the front lines for our own lives, I don't know, man. It's just, I mean, it's triggering for me to even have this conversation, to be honest with
Yeah.
you, Josh.
I
Um,
appreciate you being, vulnerable. And we spoke earlier about being vulnerable and being brave.
yeah,
Thank you for being willing to do that here right now.
yeah. It's
Um, this is not an easy thing to
yeah, man.
talk about.
It's not. I've been in counseling myself for this issue.
Yeah.
Like, I told you, men are coming to me. They're like fed up with society. Their anger is heightened. Like, I know men, like, they are mad,
Yeah.
like pissed, like mad. I'm like, man, And the reason that I'm kind of calm, I'm talking to you about it now. I talk to my wife. We check in. I'm calm because I'm not saturated in it. Like, these guys are watching it all day long.
Yeah.
Every story, everything, every little everything. They're just absorbing it all. And I had to stop doing that, because it wasn't healthy for me.
Yeah.
It makes you, you know how it goes. If you have these negative images, you think negative, you feel negative, you have a negative behavioral response. Like, I just have to limit myself. But that scene in that film to me, was a great way to show, man, we're always in a war, and we just have
Yeah.
to pick which one we want to fight.
I can't help but think about, you mentioned Dr. King, and when you were speaking about your nonprofit earlier and going into these homes and seeing the family system at work, I can't help but think about systems. I'm an MFT, so I mean that's that side of counseling is where I came from. But anytime all of us exist in multiple systems,
Mhm.
the family that you've created with your wife, that's one system. Your family of origin, that's another system. The team that you work with, that's another system. Um, and every system's governed by unwritten rules that everybody's agreed to follow, and everybody has a role in the system, and none of this got voted on. Nobody said,
Right.
I'm going to do this part, you do that
Yeah.
part, let's all show up this way, but somehow it's happening. And anytime that there's a change in the system fights back and tries to quote unquote right itself through the
Yeah.
process of homeostasis. And I can't help but think that happens in micro systems. In other words, one-to-one relationships, you and your wife, you and I, dyads. It also happens as it gets bigger. There's the family system. There's a community system. There's governmental systems. And that's where you get to the macro systems. And you see somebody like Dr. King, who was changing the system.
Yeah.
And homeostasis
Yeah. You got to fix
happened in Memphis. The system was trying to correct itself. And that's not in any way, listeners, saying that was something that's right. Homeostasis isn't something right happening. It's the resistance to change. It's going against most of the time what's right.
I'm glad you said that. Honestly, I'm glad that you said that. That you would say that that's the system trying to. It's the system. Like, in my culture, Black culture, it's a lot of people say it's the system or the man or whatever, but we know it's the system. But we know that, and let's say if we talk about a system, let's say this the system of the United States of America as the system. This wasn't a system that was created for us.
No.
In any way. Like, people say, well, this is not America. I'm like, this is exactly what America is.
Have you listened to the 1619 Project?
Nah, I've heard about it, of course.
Yeah.
I've not listened to it. What is it that I can listen to?
It's a podcast. That's what it started
Oh,
as.
a podcast. Oh, I didn't know that was just a podcast.
Well, it started as that. The New York Times created it. I want to say it's either 6 or 8 episodes. I think they're an hour each.
Yeah, I need to listen to that.
It's because it goes all the way back to 1619.
Yeah.
and it kind of traces how, because I think that this has become systemic racism, and the concept of a system that works against Black people, I think is something that's being talked about more now
Right.
than it has in the past. And so what 1619 does is it shows how that system was built.
Man, I need to check out the podcast. I know
It's great. Yeah.
Well, of course, I know our current president is against it. Maybe you heard him say that teaching. What did he say? Teaching diversity is un-American.
He moved to cancel governmental agencies teaching anti-racism training because he said anti-racism was un-American propaganda.
Yeah. The system that we're in, right?
Yeah.
And I have to operate in that system.
Well,
we all have to operate within it, right?
Yeah. So I attended a talk one time by Amy Alexander, who's the founder of the Refuge Center in Franklin. Mm-hmm. And Amy works primarily with women coming out of abusive relationships. And this particular talk, she was talking about that system of abuse. And she talked about how she no longer uses the term domestic abuse for that. She uses the term domestic terrorism. Right. Because she talked about everybody understands when a woman shows up with a black eye that it's abuse. Mm-hmm. But what happens if instead of hitting her, her partner throws a coffee mug at the wall beside her head and never touches her? And it creates this environment where she lives in such a state of constant fear and hypervigilance that the cortisol levels in her brain rise to the point that begins to affect her physical health, because humans weren't meant to have that constant state of hyperarousal all the time. And there's been something in the past couple months that's made me connect. It may have been when I watched the movie The Hate U Give, but it made me connect. I wonder if, and maybe you could speak to this, if that is the Black experience in the United States, living in this constant state of hypervigilance.
It is. Absolutely. James Baldwin wrote, to be Black in America is to be at a constant state of rage.
Yeah.
It's constant, man. And it's a constant thing, and we can't turn it off.
Which rage is not, I mean, Chip Dodd says in The Voice of the Heart, rage is the impaired state of fear, not anger.
Yeah, man. So it is and I don't speak for all Black people.
Yeah.
I don't. I say that respectfully because I know everybody's experience is different. But just generally speaking, yeah, it is. That's exactly how it is. We're at a heightened sense of anxiety all the time. Like, do you worry about getting killed by the police if you get stopped? You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I actually think that thought it just goes through my mind. Have you ever? We don't have kids. Like, you don't have to tell your son, all right, son, when you get stopped, you make sure that you might tell them that. I don't know, but some white men that I've talked to, they say they don't talk to their kids like that. They don't have to talk to their kids about.
They assume they'll be safe.
Right. And I can't just assume that.
Right.
And that in itself is like, I drive every day. I leave my house, my daughter, they give me hugs and kisses and all that. And they're hoping that I come home every day.
Yeah.
Just being a Black man is the only thing. Like, if just me walking out the door as a Black man, that's enough for them to have to hope that I come home every day. You little kids don't understand it to that degree just yet, but I'm speaking more so about my wife. Mm-hmm. And I'm worried about her too as a Black woman. So yes, we're at this heightened sense of hypervigilance. Like, it's all the time, and we can't turn it down. When we come home, it's like, all right, we're home, but you still.
But then Breonna Taylor happens,
exactly.
And like now, even in your own home,
nothing happens. Like, you can get shot. Like, even the Botham John guy that was killed in Texas, sitting on his couch eating ice cream, or you in your bed sleep, or you're getting pulled over and you're doing what the police asked you to do and you still get shot, or you're doing nothing at all and you get shot. I seen a police officer shoot a guy and he asked him, "Why'd you shoot me?" The officer says, "I don't know." Like, how do you reconcile that in your mind? And it really makes me, I don't trust the police. I'll be honest, it's not a secret. I don't trust the police. I respect authority. I do. I grew up in a military family. I understand authority and rules and all of that. But I don't trust the police. I don't trust the judicial system at all.
Well, cooperation is not trust.
No, it's
So you
definitely
can cooperate, but that doesn't
no.
mean.
And people are always like, well, what do you do if if you need help, who are you going to call? I don't even call the police. You know that? You don't know that. I don't call the police, because I'm worried that they're going to turn it around on me. I've seen it has happened to me before. I call the police about some stuff going on in my neighborhood. I end up being the person that they're like, this is not me. It's not me. I'm calling you. I asked you to come here, but you're turning this into a me thing so bad to one of the police officers finally told me, you just might want to get in your car. And she gave me permission to leave because they were treating me as if I was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And so I can't even call the police for help, even though I paid them as a tax-paying citizen.
Yeah.
I pay for that service. So if I need it, I would call. So people are like, well, if you need help, who are you going to call? I'm like, I would call the police if I needed them because I'm paying for that. But I still don't call the police.
Yeah.
If I see like an accident, somebody's dying, of course I'm going to call 911. But if there's any way possible that I can avoid calling the police or encountering them at all, I'm trying to avoid all encounters with the police.
Yeah. And I think to hear, there's been several clips that I've seen on CNN where the anchor or the reporter will be asking a person who's a high-ranking government official, if they believe that systemic racism is real within the police or the government, whatever, and they will answer no.
Straight face.
And it makes me wonder, when's the last time you sat with somebody and asked them about their experience?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in like a smart aleck way or whatever either, but I really mean, I think that, and what's strange, Brene Brown in her book, Braving the Wilderness, spoke directly to this. She said that the way that we can hate a person is that we dehumanize them by first making them a part of a group, so taking away their individuality, and second, vilifying the group, making the group other. And she, of course, gave examples of Hitler in World War II with the Jews, but she also gave the current example of things that our current president has said, be it about immigrants or Black people, where he's not talking about an individual, he's talking about a group of people. And I know that, like, I've had conversations with my relatives, and these conversations were centered around LGBTQ plus people, wherein one of my relatives was saying something about, oh, that group is this, that, or the other. And I said, how can you say that about a group of people? If I came to you and said I was gay, what would you think about me? Oh, well, I would love you. And I said, why? Well, because you're my son, because you're my brother, because you're my cousin. And I said, yeah, well, it's really tough to hate an individual. It's really easy to hate an idea or a group because you've dehumanized, you've de-individualized that person. And so when I see these government officials or high-ranking people say things like systemic racism doesn't exist, I think, when's the last time you sat with an individual and heard an individual story? Because
I think they're just flat out, just out of touch. If they really believe that, either they're lying to me when I hear that, I really sit there and think he's lying through his teeth, or he just doesn't want to admit it, or something is just like delusional. It's something like, how do you say that? Like, how
it's a
do
break
you
with
really
reality,
think that there is no systemic racism within the policing of all things in the United States?
Yeah.
Which started as a slave catching industry.
Which 1619 talked about.
How do you think that there's no how do you think that there's no systemic racism in that?
That's a great example of a system being built to work against Black people.
Yeah.
Because the origin of it was capture.
Yes. Not help, not save, none of that.
Yeah.
Capture.
Talk to me a little bit, if you're willing, about the relationship between the Bloods and the movie. I don't know if you guys, your families had a chance to watch Hamilton on Disney Plus.
Yeah, we've watched it.
My wife, to say my wife is a fan doesn't quite get there.
Yeah.
She had all the words memorized long
Ooh,
before
wow,
it
that's a
came.
lot too. It's kind of hard to watch, to
Leanne
be
Treese can
honest.
rap the verses. I'm gonna tell you that.
Really?
But so we of course like watched the little interviews or specials that came with it. And I know Leslie Odom Jr. talked about when the play was still in the early stages before it made it to Broadway. He got to sit in the audience in one of the first performances, and he said to see four Black men on stage being friends and singing about how much they loved each other
Yeah.
had such a deep impact on him. It made him want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And so, we have this unit in this movie, this squad. Thoughts?
Yeah, man. It's like it's really a reflection of what it means to be, like, we call each other bro. And a lot of people use the term bro. Um, it's like a brother from another mother. Like when you are in a situation when you go through something with someone, you build this camaraderie, and you can relate to it. You feel a part of it. It empowers you. Everyone wants to belong to a group. And the way that they were fighting and sharing stories, and it's reflective of my experiences as a Black man. Just growing up in my neighborhood, me and my homies, we used to ride around as a crew all day together, like riding bikes from one side of town to a whole nother side of town, just together. Or someone just dropped something off. Delivery. Just even being in a fraternity in college, you know what I'm saying? Just having that camaraderie. So the squad, like in the film, it's reflective of what it's really like, growing up and having a crew. We fight, we love each other, we're there for each other. We might not even all like each other, but you know what? I dare anybody to try to mess with somebody in this crew while we're all together. You know what I'm saying? And so that the squad, again, it's just reflective of what it's like to be a Black male and to be in a group and have a sense of belonging. And everybody in the group is like for you, and we're not trying to kill you. It's just like a sense of safety also. These are just my thoughts. I'm just thinking about it.
It's that element of attachment that's secure base.
Yeah.
Wherein I've got their back, they've got my back. So I don't have to put up a front. I don't have to be anything other than me, because I know I can bring the real me and I'm not in danger of losing them.
Right. I mean, sometimes it doesn't always work out that way.
Well, that's people. I mean, so my kind of like thing that I repeat a lot on this show is, whenever somebody says something that is a common human experience, but they're not really like seeing it, I always say, it sounds like you got a bad case of being a person.
Yeah. Right.
And, that's an example of like having a bad case of being a person. Like you can have secure attachment, but sometimes you still get in fights, and sometimes you still, have periods of disconnection because you don't want to engage the hurt, or you don't want to admit that you hurt somebody that you care about.
Yeah.
That's hopefully, as we continue to grow as people, like the time period between offense and kind of realizing what happened and circling back to repair lessens, but that's part of being a person.
Yeah. Human experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering if there's anything else in the movie. I mean, first off, we could talk about this movie we could do 7 episodes on this.
We really could.
I mean, I think about things that stick out in my mind, when, and I got the IMDb page pulled up because my knowledge of character names is terrible, but Eddie. I mentioned to you like early on, the only other movie that's gotten my heart rate up this high while I watched it was The Hurt Locker. And that's because it centers around IEDs and landmines. Yeah. They land in Vietnam. Every movie I've ever seen in Vietnam, there's landmines, there's napalm, there's people jumping up out of nowhere and firing machine guns. And so from the moment they land, my heart rate is high. And I didn't know a thing about this movie other than Chadwick Boseman was in it and Spike Lee directed it.
Yeah.
That's all I knew.
Yeah.
My heart rate's up. And all of a sudden, Eddie is talking about how money is the root of all evil, and Norman wanted them to give back to the community. Boom.
Out of there.
And then it shows him on the ground.
Halfway gone.
And right at that moment, my wife was walking into the living room with her breakfast plate to sit down.
Yeah.
And I held my hand up like this and I said, hold on,
Yeah.
hold on. You might not want to see this.
Yeah.
But that was so sudden. We were talking about Chadwick Boseman earlier. Chadwick Boseman's death deeply affected me because at the end of June, my grandfather died.
I'm sorry to hear that, man.
Thank you. He was my dad left our family pretty early on, and he stepped in and was a tremendous influence on me. Grief is not a one and done experience.
Right.
Grief is a regular visitor. It's like the tide. Sometimes it comes in and it's high. Sometimes it goes out. Yeah. And there was something about reading about Chadwick. There was something about, and because it's being so close to experiencing a real death, it re-triggered that grief.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was about this movie. Maybe it's because Chadwick was just in it. But that scene with Eddie got me too. It was the suddenness of one moment, your friend is here.
Yeah.
And in the very next moment, he's gone. And then to have that followed up, not a tremendous amount of time later with Paul's son, David, being put in the same situation. And that, being a drawn out scene in comparison with Eddie's death scene, right. Which, he didn't end up dying, but you didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was like all of a sudden my fear spikes, my grief is back, all of this coming all in at once. It was just, such a powerful movie that I really do. You and I, we could sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, we could. I've watched the film twice, and I usually watch films multiple times.
Yeah.
Just because it's just something I always see something different, or I'm looking behind. I'm not looking at the main characters. I'll just start looking at what's going on in the background or whatever. But that movie is it's such a great film. When the first time I saw it, I usually kind of rank films, whether I'm going to watch them again or not. Mm-hmm. And it was definite, I'm going to watch this again, and I'm going to watch it many times in my life over the years to come. Because it's such a great film. The cinematography of it's great. The story is good.
They shot the scenes in the past on 16 millimeter film, actual film. Yeah. And apparently the studio tried to fight them on that. But Spike Lee's cinematographer said, this is what would have been used at that time.
Yeah. It makes it, you can tell it makes a difference.
Yeah.
It's, it's a great film. It's for so many different reasons. I didn't think that I would be talking about it in this way with someone when I first watched it. And I was just talking to my wife about it. She's like, you got to watch this. She hadn't watched it yet. She's missing out. But I think when she watches it, we'll have some good dialogue about it.
Tell her not to be eaten when she watches it.
And she's probably not want to watch it after the first minute or two.
Yeah.
After seeing that guy get, because when I saw that, I was like, God, all right, we're in. the movie started. We're in this thing.
And there were parts. I think one of the things that makes this movie such an interesting starting place of discussion is, there were parts where when these guys got to Vietnam, I'm thinking of the time when they were in a boat and somebody comes up alongside them in another boat and tries to sell Paul a chicken. Yeah, and he keeps saying no. He begins to shout, "You're a GI. You killed my mother and father." Yep. And there's, in the same way at the beginning, there were these flashes of actual footage from then. That continues through the movie. You get other flashes. But there's some where you see children who died from napalm or from getting shot or from landmines or something. And so you have these guys that came from America in a system where they were oppressed to serve the military in Vietnam while still being oppressed and devalued in the military. And now you have people who are having an outcry against them for the oppression that they felt was imposed upon them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even,
And this
that's what
is
I'm saying.
real,
There's so
like,
many levels in this movie.
this really happened. Like,
Yeah.
this is not just a film we're talking about. This is the depiction of what really happened, like the psychological issues that Black soldiers really, truly had to deal with.
I know one more thing we got to touch on, and
What's
it
that?
has to do with Paul again.
Yeah.
I was just thinking as you were saying that, the toll that it would take on an individual to be oppressed and yet be a soldier in a foreign country. You mentioned earlier Paul was suffering from PTSD. We find out why towards the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in a battle in this plane that had been uncovered where they found Norman's body. Well, the reason they found Norman's body there is because a soldier was sneaking up behind Paul. He turns and fires in a way that's like a sweeping, wide way, and he's the one that killed Norman. And he's been holding on to that for, at this point, Vietnam was in the 60s.
I think it was 40 years.
Yeah, 40, 50 something years. Yeah. Had
Holding
been
on
holding
to that
on
for
to it.
that long.
Yeah.
You know, he was saying, like, in the film, how Stormin would visit him,
Talk to him every night, he said.
Yeah, every night. He said, and he was like, he don't come to see y'all. Like, he was just shocked that he doesn't come to see them. And it was just cool to see how all of them were dealing with PTSD in their own way also. But yeah, him being the reason that Storm and Norman died and holding it in for so long. Yeah, it was deep.
Yeah.
Deep. And I've actually talked to men who fought in Vietnam, and the ones that want to talk about it, they told me some of the most horrific stories you would ever hear. I mean, it was like, man, you saw that. You actually have that true experience etched in your brain of seeing people getting killed in all kind of different ways on a daily basis, friendly fire, heads getting blown off, but their body's still moving because they're not dead yet. Like, all these horrific things. And it's just like, wow. And then you come home and you still treat it like nothing.
Or the expectation is go right back into your job.
Yeah. If you could get a job.
Like nothing happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could go on. I could even go on about that too, as it relates to just Black culture and how kids and people are seeing in their neighborhoods, people get shot and killed. And even just us seeing it on TV, we don't get any help with that. We're expected to just go back to school the next day and just behave normally, or go back to work and behave normally. But if a soldier or any person sees that type of trauma, they're going to get help automatically, have all these services available for them. But in the community, it's just, you just got to go back. Yeah, you saw George Floyd get killed on the sidewalk, but tomorrow you got to go to work, or the next day you go to school, or whatever it is that you had going on, you're expected to do it. Just go back and do it, with no resources around you. But that's, like I said, I don't know, maybe it is good for this conversation. Yeah. I think this film, wanting to discuss this film, has done exactly what I hoped that it would do. Just start dialogue around this current social climate and how something that happened in the 60s, a war, it's in the impacts and ramifications of it, and the vestiges of racism and systemic oppression is still here with us today. And unfortunately, I just don't, it's very negative, I guess. I don't think it's going to change, Josh, or ever be completely eradicated, especially when you have a president that's doing what he's currently doing, saying that these things are un-American, to talk about anti-racism. And I'm not that optimistic, to be honest. Well, that's sad in itself.
It is sad, but I mean, Eric, because of your perspective and your life, I don't know if we're ever going to be rid of it, but I do know this: we have zero chance if we can't talk about it. Zero chance. Oh, if we can start talking, we got a 1% chance at worst.
Yeah, it works.
Which progress over perfection. If we get one foot in front of the other,
yeah,
that gives our children a better chance than we had. that gives their children a better chance than they had. And to not be able to talk about it at all is sealing the fate.
Right.
I don't, it's always tough when we talk about things that are heavy on the show to make a transition to another part. But I want to say, like, obviously we've said many times in the past few minutes, we could talk for hours about this movie. I even think, if we've mentioned how different perspectives are, I think, Paul in the movie wore a Make America Great Again hat.
Right.
And they had a part where they talked about I'm sure it wasn't Delroy Lindo, the actor, but his character was in the back of President Trump at a rally holding up a sign, and you see this character engaging with a different perspective than probably his brothers in that squad had.
Right.
Yet they still look at him as a brother. They still look at him as somebody that they have a relationship with. And regardless of how he views things or they view things, they got his back. He got their back.
Yeah. It's because they went through what they went through together.
Yeah.
When I've never been to war, of course.
But shared experiences.
Yeah. If you're in that bunker with someone, you don't care what color they are.
Yeah.
You just want them to shoot that gun and protect me, and I got your back. And once that bond is created, it means something. It's a special bond. Yeah. And I think those guys in that squad had it. And even though he was a Trump supporter in the film, they still loved him.
Yeah.
They just knew he was, definitely going through some things.
Yeah. Oh. I'm wondering if you could tell me something that your clients have taught you.
Yeah. I work with a lot of young people. And this is not something that's like super profound, but my clients have taught me the value of staying young and staying in touch with generations behind you or that are coming up behind you. It keeps me young. I look young. I look younger than I am, and I feel younger than I am. And it's because I'm not only around adults all the time, or people older than me. Being around little kids, 5, 6, 7, and not being their parents and having that experience with them from a mentor's perspective or a counseling perspective, it keeps me young. And so that's what they've taught me. They just taught me the value of staying young, which in turn it keeps me flexible in my thinking, because generations, like, we don't all think the same. I'm like the first millennial, right? I'm in the first year of millennials, and my co-host on my podcast, he's 27. So he's kind of towards the end of it. We're not exactly the same, and we're a lot alike in some ways, but just the difference makes a difference. But then when you go to the next generation behind, and even beyond to the next generation, it just helps you stay young. And so I think my clients have helped me, really value the concept of being young at heart and being, just young, so I would say that.
It sounds like engaging with that different perspective also helps you to maintain humility, almost, just to realize I'm not the end all be all. What I think is not engraved on stone tablets. I could be wrong.
And I have no problem admitting that either. I think that's a good thing. You can admit that you don't know everything. Because, everybody comes to us thinking we know everything and have all the answers to all their problems. I tell people, hey, I don't know everything. You're the expert on you. I have this skill set and this training. I can help you, but I don't know everything. And then I don't know everything. Yeah. I don't know everything. So,
well, that's why we get trained, because if counseling was based on personal experience,
right,
I'd only be able to counsel people that have had the same experience as me, but absolutely, I had it before them. That's why we have to develop skills, because if somebody comes in with a life experience vastly different than mine, I can still help them, but it's not because I lived it.
Right. Yeah. And there's a difference.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you could tell me what's something that you do to take care of yourself right now?
Oh, like I said earlier, I've started the different regimens of supplements to kind of manage my anxiety, eating better, even though I've been eating terribly, like in the last few days for some reason. I don't know. Starbucks. I blame it on Starbucks. I do. The cinnamon. What's that?
Cinnamon dolce latte?
Not the drink. I just drink regular black coffee. but the cinnamon bun thing, not what is it called? The coffee cake.
Yeah.
It's like every day. I don't know, but I ride my bike every day. I try to ride it like 15 to 20 miles, not every day, at least 3 to 4 times a week. I try to do 15 to 20 miles or more.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing to take care of myself. Keeping everything in its proper perspective, like me, and I'm talking about family wise.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a pandemic. Like I can't be arguing with my wife about why I left the toilet seat up or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like we got to keep things in their proper perspective. And that's helped me a lot, just to keep things in their right perspective. Getting out on my bike and just enjoying nature, being outside, was eating better, but just making sure that I'm in tune with my body, Josh, is what I'm doing to maintain during this.
I think you know what? Earlier this year, I set a goal that I wanted to learn more about, engage with the physical aspect of recovery from addiction.
Wow.
And I've read a lot of books that talk about the importance of it. And I've had a lot of podcast guests that have talked about, whenever I ask them that question, physical, they usually start with something like this. I know it's weird, but really moving my body and exercising. And I'm like, that's not weird at all, because if anxiety never lives in the present. Anxiety always lives in the future. So what it requires is you to kind of disintegrate your mind from your body.
Yeah.
And so I remember back in like 2005, when I got my job in San Diego, I moved down. About a month later, the girl I was dating broke up with me. So I'm in a new city, in a new house. I didn't have any friends. I just started a new job, and now I lost my relationship. And I was a mess. Well, the guy that I was working for was a surfer, and he bought me a surf lesson. So I go down there to the beach and I get in the water. Lesson's like an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
I have one of these moments where I'm getting out of the water and I go, oh my gosh, I didn't think about her. And it was one of these things post breakup where you go, oh my gosh, you realize you weren't dwelling on her obsessively for, a little bit of time. And I realized how refreshing it was. And when you are doing something physical with your body, it is a grounding experience because it requires your body and your mind to work in unison.
Absolutely.
And so it's an integrating experience. And when it comes to like recovery from addiction or even just normal self-care, that's so helpful because it requires your brain to come back to the present moment, live in the here and now, and concentrate on what you're doing. Because if you were riding your bike and your mind is like way out there, you're going into other lanes. You're
not safe.
That ditch. Oh yeah. You got to be in the here and now. Absolutely. Yeah. So let's say that somebody was listening to this episode today and they're just thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, Eric is amazing. I feel like I could connect with him. I'd love to be his client. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go directly to my website, ericthecounselor.com, and just request an appointment based on your age. If you're a young person, you just request a youth appointment, or if you're an adult, request an adult appointment. If you just want to kind of just follow me, learn more about me, and then decide, I spend a lot of time on Instagram at Eric_the_counselor. Facebook, same thing, Eric the Counselor. You can always listen to our podcast, Experience Mental Health. We're on YouTube and any popular podcast platform. You can pretty much find us there. The iHeart Radios, the Apple Podcasts. We're not on Spotify because they said there was another show with our title, but we can't find it. But whatever. So yeah, you can also follow the podcast on Instagram at EMH Now on Instagram, just to kind of stay up to what we're doing and just listen to a good, fun, lifestyle, entertaining show about mental health. It's all about having fun. We bring in everyday people to share their personal stories. Because as you mentioned earlier, when you hear another person's story, it kind of helps you. It can motivate you. And so you can find out about that on Instagram, EMH Now.
Yeah. You guys have one of the best podcast intros.
Oh yeah, you
I've like ever heard. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah. When I pulled it up the other night, I was like, man, these guys know what they're doing. Oh man.
So you got an old radio guy, and then you got my co-host. He's the one that does all the editing. He's a video guy. And so we decided, let's bring our skills together and make a dope podcast about mental health.
It is dope.
And so that's I appreciate that compliment.
Oh man, Eric, I
We're
can't even
actually
begin
getting
to.
ready to change it.
You're getting ready to change it?
We're about
Oh,
to update it. Yeah, it's time to update it.
well, whatever you updated to is going to be great too.
Yeah, it'll be dope. It'll be
I
nice.
can't even begin to tell you how much I've enjoyed getting to meet you today and
Yeah, it's
chatting
been
with
good.
you. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't
No
wait for
problem.
round 2.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it.
I
I'll
love
make
it.
sure to have another good controversial opinion. Yeah, I
All
love
right, my friend.
controversy.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me this week in the theater. I'll make sure I save a seat for you and a friend next week. Let's raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.